Yes, a very good morning, and we welcome you to the topical discussion. My name is Simon Kagwanjala. As we continue making sense of the rifts that are widening within the opposition camps, well, the National Unity Platform is taking a fair share now of spotlight in the wake of the Mpuga Bobi Wine rift that stemmed from the 500 million service award saga. A lot has transpired since. We've seen the president of National Unity Platform dropping Mpuga from the position of deputy president, and it looks as though the stalemate is set to continue. But what is the untold story that we need to explore as a country? And what does this kind of rift or this kind of stalemate point to as we talk multi-party democracy? I'll be joined this morning by Edgar Tabaro, a lawyer and a political analyst, together with Mr. Mwebesa Ndebesa, retired Don, right, and a political analyst. Good to have you, Edgar, and a very good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kagwanjala. I'm happy to be here with Professor Ndebesa, with whom I've interacted over. Incidentally, I think I've been with him on these shows for close to 20 years now.
Oh,
yes.
So you are also historical.
No, it's 2016, 2015,
somehow
2016.
we've all become veterans.
We've become veterans, and I've come of age. Professor was calling me a boy earlier in the show, before we started, but I think I've now I've earned my place at the table of
Good to see you, and a very good morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning to the listeners and viewers out there.
Is the current situation, for instance, in the National Unity Platform, a sum of what multi-party politics has become?
Multi-party politics in Uganda has not yet taken root, but somehow we may have to appreciate that this is a post-colonial state. Post-colonial states have certain characteristics. They are heterogeneous. They have not yet forged the national identity. We still have ethnic, tribal, religious, regional, sometimes clan, sometimes family identities. We have not yet formed a national identity. As I have always said here and elsewhere, Uganda is, I compare Uganda with a computer metaphor, that the British came here about 130 years ago, which is not a long time in history of a nation state, and created a hardware. But they didn't do much to create a software of values and principles and those other soft issues that create a national identity. And so in such a circumstances, when you have political organizations like political parties, they are bound to have such fissures within them. But other factors are internal to those political parties, but others are external to the political parties. So when you are looking at the challenges within NUP, or indeed FDC, or even NRM, you have to look at the wider context. There is a context to these contradictions with this multi-party system and democracy generally. And some people actually go to extreme to say, now we abandon multi-party, we abandon democracy because it has failed to take roots. No, democracy will have, all over the world, it has got those challenges. And democracy has got its limitations and challenges. Actually, I sometimes also normally quote Churchill, the one-time prominent leader of UK, when he said that democracy is the worst form of government he had ever met, except that there are no alternatives. That is an indicator that there are challenges and limitations of democracy, but that is no reason to abandon them. Now, for NUP, what is happening in NUP is a manifestation of those challenges, external to it and internal to it, and it stemmed from a systemic corruption that is going on in the country, and particularly in this reference to parliament. what is happening in Parliament is actually, during COVID, we had this common saying of SOPs, standard operating procedures. But what we have now in Parliament is corruption operating procedures. It is COPS, corruption standard procedures. And people go by those standard procedures. We need to have integrity operating procedures to counter them. And I think NUP, and indeed all the other political parties, have not come up with integrity operation procedures. Having procedures, the Kiswahili word for Tanzania especially is better. It is called muongozo. It's like guidelines or a code of conduct. If NUP had a clear guideline or code of conduct, clear, even with a manual, then these lawyers like my friend Tabalo here would say, pursuant to this article. So pursuant to this standard procedure or code of conduct or guideline, you use it now to put somebody to order. But when you simply say in generalities that you see you went out of the NUP's values and principles without quoting a particular code of conduct rule that you put,
is one of them,
you put in place. Transparency is too general. You have to put it, you have to put it down. When let's use this case of the Bible. The Bible has 10 commandments, but that is in Exodus, I think. But when they went to Deuteronomy, there are more than 600, again, regulations or guidelines, conduct of human relations beyond the 10 commandments. So NUP or indeed FDC or whatever, they need to come up with those guidelines or muongozi. That's why Tanzania found it necessary during Nyerere to put up muongozi wa tano. And later, actually, originally, muongozi wa tano in Musoma resolution, and later muongozi wa tano in the Arusha Declaration. To be very clear, and when you go out of those guidelines, you are brought to order. So I think NUP has failed to come up with that, and it has fallen into the temptation of the corruption operating procedures of Parliament and the political class in Uganda, and they have got entangled in that corruption standard procedures, and they are failing to get out because they didn't have a counter, which would be a code of conduct detailed. For example, finally, as I conclude this section, is that corruption is general. At times, people don't define it clearly. Right. There is a conflict of interest. It is a very, very, very serious type of corruption, conflict of interest. So, for example, I think Mpuga fell into that, to decide on that environment or whatever, when he was part and parcel of it. But because they don't have that standard operating procedure, integrity operating procedure, recently I saw actually Honorable Zake falling exactly into that, because he had been commissioner designate to Parliament, right. And then NUP had a meeting, and he was the one who raised up the issue of bringing Mpuga out of the commission in Parliament. The same person who is aspiring to be a member is the same person who came up with the resolution. That is also conflict of interest. If they had a clear code of conduct, they would have realized that also Honorable Zake was also falling into the same problem of conflict of interest. So they are curing a problem. And then they create another problem because they are not very clear and they have not defined what is corruption that they should tackle head on.
Thank you. Edgar, there are two conflicting theories. One school of thought puts this as a mere power struggle and fighting corruption as secondary. What's your reading?
Now, first, Professor dwells so much on Tanzania. He schooled at University of Dar es Salaam. So that's why he cut his academic and political teeth. So he's naturally drawn to Tanzania. And I think there's much to learn from Tanzania. However, we would be unfair to ourselves. Tanzanians are very disciplined people as compared to Ugandans. It's in their national ethos. It's in their national ethics. There was a time, you remember, Chege, the Minister of Justice, was involved in, was it the Richard Mond scandal? And he had unexplained amounts of money on his account. And he was asked to step down. It's that serious there. So now when we come to Uganda, and I'm not saying the economies of Uganda, there's a disparity between the economies of, the structure of the economies of Uganda and that one of Tanzania. But however, in Uganda, I always say these things, and sometimes I anger people. We're a primordial society. We are pre-industrial. We are pre-capitalist. We are pre-scientific. Eh?
We are not yet anywhere, you think?
We are at that stage of primitive accumulation. And when a primitive accumulation of capital is what defines, believe me, the boundaries of what, indeed, you've had the professor ask, what is corruption? Conflict of interest in some societies is seen as a very big moral, an offense of moral turpitude. In Uganda, it has become commonplace that you can sit in the decision of where your interests are in a conflict with the decision you're going to make, and you make a decision in your favor. You sit, you employ your own relative. There's a board that I used to sit on, a Netherlands company, Dutch company, and my wife sought employment there, and I didn't sit in it. I didn't sit in that decision. I actually subsequently withdrew from the board. Now, not that I was even forced, but I saw it as the right thing to do.
Did you have a hand in procuring a job for her?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. I didn't have a hand in it at all. And when it came up, I decided to recuse myself. So,
so what's fundamental here that the country should be discussing?
We operate in a system of impunity. There's so much you can do and get away with. And I don't want to pinpoint people. The discussion has been very wide. And if we just limit it to Mpuga and Bobby Wine, we shall be...
That's the bigger picture I want us to look at.
It's impunity. It's impunity. I mean, the way we operate, both in the public and private sector.
So is NUP launching a new kind of politics that is checking impunity, or they're just an extension of it?
Well, the word we've been hearing out there, if you have your ears close to the ground, is that there's been a simmering power struggle. Mind you, NUP was started as a platform. Remember, it was people power, started as a platform, and transitioned into a political party in a very short time. So what we are seeing in part is storming for them to crystallize, and more importantly, for Honorable Chagulanyi to assert his authority and power.
So these are teething problems, right?
Well, I mean, they're expected. Political parties, let us give the example of Uganda. Right from the pre-independence politics, Uganda National Congress, we had two influential people. Was that nationalist, the founder of the Uganda National Congress?
The one who is buried at
Colombo. Musazi. Then Dr. Bote. There was that tension between the two, and Obote breaking away to form his own political party with the Retsibas, the Jolly Joke Chiwanukas, the grandfather of the present Attorney General. That was at independence. Then 1966, there was that rift, but that was largely ideological between Kakonge and Ibinjira. Ibinjira being a rightist, a far rightist, and Kakonge being a leftist. Kakonge was rigged out of the Secretary Generalship in Igulu, and as a result, a number of leftist UPCs, youth wingers, were expelled from the party. I think there was Chirunda Chive Jinja, There was Chintu Musoke. Bidandi Sali
Sali.
somehow survived. No, Bidandi Sali incidentally had been appointed chairman of the Electoral Commission for the 1971, the aborted 1971 elections. Then DP itself, we had those who crossed, led by Basiri Batalingaya. So there was also a breakup of...
So is history repeating itself?
In 1980, 79, 80,
that was
the
ideological.
factions... No. There was also a bit of, when I talk of primordial, I wanted to talk about the aspect of patron-client relations. Now, if you have a patron who controls access to resources, and these resources we are talking about cash, money, you're bound to have rent seekers jostling for access to that money. And we have a much bigger problem in the way we operate our political parties. We are only 20 years old in the multi-party dispensation. And you can see it's still nascent. It's still nascent. And I want to draw comparisons with the Republic of Ghana. In 1991, when the Bretton Woods were doing an assessment on conditionalities, easing conditionalities, and also approving, what was it? Debt what? Debt restructuring and debt forgiveness. Uganda and Ghana were ranked as what? As peers. Right. Now, over the years, Ghana has matured. It has deepened its democratization process. Uganda, on the contrary, we've taken a different tangent. So what we are seeing are really birth pranks of a nascent democracy. That these political parties are still immature. Many of them are still, I wouldn't even call them, I don't even think they have been born yet. They are still at the embryonic stages. Now, the older political parties, UPC, DP, have now been reduced. Not previously, they had some ideological orientation, but really, at the time they were being formed, it was a contest between Mengo and Budu Catholics, between Protestants and the Catholics. But now the two political parties have been reduced to provincial assemblies. But these tensions have always existed. Even when Obote was in exile, you remember he gave a decree. He pronounced a hadith on the UPC members that they should not contest in the National Resistance Council. There are persons who broke ties, but they remained UPC, but they defied Dr. Bote and contested. One of them being Cecily Ogwal, Let Kanyomozi, Ambassador Francis Wutajira, and many others. So what we are seeing in NUP is not
historic.
It's not unique.
Well,
it's not unique. I'm even surprised that it didn't happen earlier.
Well, I'm glad he's brought in the historic perspective of the things that happened back in the day. But in all this, how do you see the politics of patronage, intolerance, and greed playing out?
I will respond to that one like this. As I had earlier on said, democracy or political governance has got limitations, but let's use democracy now. And there are always the disadvantages of democracy, actually, because you can have democracy and you kill people. You can allow freedoms and you come up with hate speech. You can allow democracy and it leads to inefficiency. And you cannot make decisions because you want consent.
Sometimes even the breakdown of the state.
Even the breakdown of the state. But however, what should be done is to continuously, evolutionary, decrease on the negatives of democracy and increase on the positives of democracy, on the advantages. What has been done in Uganda is that we have been increasing on the disadvantages of democracy. And when you bottle up people in a calabash, like the proverbial CNN, the grasshopper, they are bound to begin pecking on each other. You see? So the atmosphere, I think the political space has not been conducive enough for these political parties to exercise their rights, of course, under certain guidelines, in such a manner that we are building society. We are building a national identity. We are lessening, decreasing on factions,
Factitious.
society. Instead, we are increasing it. And the politicians or the political class in these political organizations and in, and in those in power have deliberately tried to promote that one, not to decrease that one, to allow consensus, to allow dialogue, to reduce these ones. Dialogue using the law, codes of conduct, but also unwritten laws, which are called norms. So the norms we are promoting are those of divergence. The norms we are promoting are those of opportunism. The norms that the political class is promoting is that of struggling for power, for offices in power, not for nation building. The country is missing nation building. As we have both pointed out, it is a young state. 130 years is not an old one. And moreover, the British did not mind about uniting us. And I've always referred people to the 1961 Munster Commission report, the Relationships Commission report, which pointed out these relationships of different communities in Uganda and different parties in Uganda, and actually warned that if they are not handled properly, then we shall have problems.
We shall have fractures.
Now, instead of looking at that condition and trying to solve it, people take advantage of it in order to get offices, in order to get into power, and those in power in order to perpetuate themselves into power.
Edgar says he's surprised it's taken this long for NUP to start disintegrating or to start getting into this state. Do you share the same notion?
I do, and I am not even sure, whether actually what is happening in NUP is necessarily based on wanting to fight corruption. It could be, I am saying it could be, it may be, I am not sure, that actually the Mpuga group or some other group has been planning to form their own political party to break away. And Kyagulanyi might be staving it, might be undermining that breakaway, might be disrupting it. But
do you see it imminent?
Well, in Uganda, it is the norm. He has pointed out how political parties actually disintegrated. There is even the history he didn't bring out very well. Obote and Musazi broke off, not necessarily to form a coalition with the Rwesiba group. No, Rwesiba group had also formed their own party.
Uganda People's Union.
Uganda People's Union. So Uganda National Congress had two wings. There was Uganda National Congress Obote wing, and Uganda National Congress Musazi wing. The Obote Musazi wing, the Obote wing. Uganda National Congress wing merged with UPU to form UPC in 1960. Then they formed a coalition with Kabaka Yeka, and which Kabaka Yeka also broke up in 1965. And that is one case of falling out.
Even DP 1984. You remember the DP of Semogere and the DP of Tiberio Toma Kenyi,
yeah, but even
and Andrew Adimola. They were all Catholic.
So
they were all Roman Catholic. But these were now actually DP breaking off. And those are the ones who formed the critical nucleus for the 1985 coup in July 1985.
But we have even forgotten that UPC by 1971 had two wings. There was UPC in the western Uganda and Kore, Chigezi area. There was UPC in Pomba and UPC Omufunguro. That was in Ankore. And in Chigezi there was UPC Baboga and Banyama.
Okay. Their issues then were quite ideological.
Not
necessarily. And that's why
they were just individual...
Jostling for not just power, but for the spoils that come from power.
So has multipartyism now been reduced to power struggles?
Has it been reduced or it has
been? It has always been.
It has not been allowed space to function. More so under the NRM system, because I think President Museveni, who has been at the helm of this political dispensation, after the referendum of whether we should open up or remain in the movement system, he did say that as far as he's concerned, the movement was superior to multi-party. So, in other words, he was not promoting multi-partyism. He just wanted to get rid of other people And I think that doesn't...
So the country is now harvesting the false premise on which parties started.
It is not the premise at which they started. It is the conditions under which they operate. It is the context under which they operate. Which conditions, some of them are inherent, because Uganda is a risk-developed country. Uganda is a peasant-based economy or agrarian economy. Uganda is a heterogeneous community. Uganda is a post-colonial state. Uganda is in the third world. Uganda is in the Great Lakes region of Africa, which is prone even to genocide. Uganda has got those tendencies of factionalism, fracturism. However, that is not to say that we should sit down like if you burn your house or you find your house burnt, you just sit in the dust and wait for divine intervention. No, it's that we should consciously, intentionally build a society in Uganda and not intentionally destroy political organizations that are meant to create harmony in society in an evolutionary manner, but not
we're going to get to that after the break.
That can only happen.
The question that remains...
And that's what I'll discuss in the next segment.
Sure.
That can only happen if we have a civically competent civil society, elite, intelligentsia.
Which is nurtured.
Okay.
I wanted to disagree with my colleague here when he said that
you'll allow me to take a very short break.
By nature,
there are quite a number of questions that we shall be delving into. And most importantly is whether the kind of new politics where intolerance and power struggles are now coming to the fore will speak to the future of politics in the country. Good morning. Welcome back as we continue unpacking the growing stalemate within the opposition, where apparently NUP is getting a bit of spotlight. The issues emerging there have quite a lot for the country to discuss. But do you see politics of intolerance now taking center stage, where there's no entertainment to dissent?
We have already had politics of intolerance in Uganda. This wouldn't be new.
But in the opposition.
But let's start with the 1961 elections. Benedicto Chiwanuka didn't win so easily. Benedicto Chiwanuka applied violence, particularly in Budu. If you are UPC and you dared go against the position of Benedicto Chiwanuka, Benedicto Kajimu Chiwanuka, you faced the wrath of the people. You remember these buildings we used to call Obugaga Bukomi, the ones that arose out of the coffee boom. And there were these, Mategura houses that were built in the countryside with Ford cortinas and very, very large water harvesting tanks, in the villages. Some of those elites who took on Chiwanuka had their coffee plantations slashed and their houses destroyed. 1962.
From bitter loyalists.
But in 1962, you remember KY, 21, unopposed. You couldn't dare go against the word of Mengo. Come to 1966, you know what happened. You remember Michael Chintu.
We need to put that very well in the context.
In the context.
Historical context. First of all, most of the slashing of houses and burning this and that violence of 61 was actually against DP by Mengo. Not the other way around.
No, in Budu, I'm saying Budu.
Maybe in Budu. But then
in Budu, it was the reverse. No, the one you're talking about of KY was the one actually of 1962.
No, 61.
Self-governance and independence
government. 61.
Yeah.
61.
I stand guided.
Mengo was against people of DP registering to vote. So they made it impossible for people to register. And then in 1962, there was rigging of elections by a coalition of UPC and Kabaka Yeka within Buganda.
So are we getting back to that trajectory of things?
Well, it's not about the trajectory of things. That's who we are. That's how we have evolved. That's who we are, intolerance. Now, same thing 1979-80. President Museveni actually made it very clear that he's going to the bush. And Dr. Bote says, You go to the bush, you shall find you there. And it's alleged, I have tried to look for the information, I've failed to come across it. So it actually said whether the elections are rigged or not, that he would go to the what? To the bush. And you remember the attempt to form UPM. The original founders of UPM, Letka Yona Kanyongas was involved, Professor Kamuntu was involved, but they failed to agree on who should lead the party. So it turned out President Museveni and the late Jeremiah Opira. I'm surprised Opira didn't play a prominent role post-1986. He was Deputy Secretary General of which was that?
UPM.
No, he was Deputy President of UPM. But in the late 1960s, he was Akena Doko's deputy. Which was that organ?
General
Service Unit, the spy unit.
GSU.
GSU. Now, come to 1985, the peace talks in Nairobi. You remember there was that division, the dichotomy of the northern and the south, Bantuphone and the Nilotics. Now, come post-1986, President Museveni, what he likes to say, Oksinga Kokobuta Korachi, Obtasingan, in Runyankore, that in victory, he became magnanimous. He called all these groups to sit at the table, and they formed a what? A coalition. There were people in DP who were not happy with Semogerere joining what? So for the first 10 years, up to around 1994, when we didn't have open competition for political positions, there was a bit of stability in our politics. That when elections came in and electioneering, then we went back to our mode. We went back to factory settings. Remember, professors already told you that Uganda is a post-colonial state. And the post-colonial state, remember, we operated as an enclave economy.
You seem to suggest that we are now getting back to default settings.
We're in default settings. And we can only deepen the democracy. Because it's already pointed out, professors pointed out, there are certain negative aspects of democracy. They can produce hate speech. They can produce dominance of some groups over the others.
But the other reality that we are not discussing now, which is playing out significantly, is the personalization of politics, of political parties.
Don't call it even personalization, cult-like leadership. Cult-like leadership. And that is a very dangerous space to be. Because come 2026, 81% of the electorate in 2026 is going to be between the age of 18 and 30. Bobby Wine, Honorable Chagulanyi, is a pop star. He has deep appeal to a certain section of this society. You saw him attempting to mobilize last year. And you saw the shockers he pulled. Now, we are going to have a cult leader on one side and a cult leader on the other side. The Museveni adherents do not want to hear anything like an alternative view. The Bobby Wine adherents don't want to hear anything but what? But Bobby Wine.
So do you agree with now this new phrase, cult-like politics? And is it taking root?
Cultism is there, and in such a circumstance...
Is it manifested now in this dispute?
Yes, it is. People who support somebody not because of that person's values and principles he or she stands for, but just because they support the person. You hear even people saying, me, NRM is in my blood, UPC is in my blood, NUP is in my blood. What genetics is that? What genetics is that? It can't be in your blood. You must be convinced that certain values for which I stand for which where I am anchored, are being represented by the leader that I'm following. But not just follow me. I can't follow a leader just because you are smart or you are tall or you belong to my tribe. It is the values. And the principles
that you
and the norms which I believe in to see whether you actually stand for them. I can tell you one, to be personal, me, I'm for social justice. I believe in equality as a principle.
Equality or equity?
Well, let's use a generic word, equality, because it comes from the French Revolution's three slogans. Equality. I cannot tolerate inequality. wherever I find it. Like we now have spatial inequality in this country. One region is already almost upper middle income. Another region is not even looking into the lower middle income or whatever the case may be.
In squalor.
So anyway, going back to the conflict, you know, the context in which
cultism.
Cultism is brought about by the conditions in which we are. You know, we still have an agrarian society, peasant-like society, and for them, their support, their political support, is based on sentiments and emotions, not rationale, I'm sorry to say. And some people pretend that that is easy. Anybody who tells you it is easy to mobilize peasants is lying to you. It's not easy to mobilize peasants. It is not easy to mobilize people who are scattered in these small holdings in the country. It is not easy to mobilize people who don't read even a newspaper except the Bible and the Quran on Friday and the Bible on Sunday. It is not easy to mobilize people who don't listen to these divergent views like we are pointing out. So now in such a situation, I am not saying that it is hopeless. It is not hopeless. The people who are making it hopeless is the political class. The political class who are more interested in political positions. The political class should guide the population in such a manner that we cultivate a spirit of tolerance, but also build institutions and rules around which this national unity and national forging a nation can evolve. The fundamental problem in Uganda is not actually the question of elections as such. The fundamental question is lack of a national identity. And this national identity can be consciously nurtured if the politics, the politics we have are deliberately interested in nation building as statesmen and stateswomen. But what we have all across the board, we have the political class which is interested in their positions, in their self-interest. And as such, instead of maximizing the disadvantages of democracy in a post-colonial state, instead of maximizing the positives, the advantages, they are maximizing the disadvantages. They are whipping up people's sentiments and people's emotions, and we are failing to build institutions. We are depending on individuals, hence cultism.
There is a strong feeling that almost 20 years down the road since multipartyism was launched in the country, reintroduced, it has failed to kick off. Are we using a wrong experiment, or
has it failed to kick off?
Multipartyism in the country,
it has been failed.
Is just a fallacy of some, an illusion of some kind.
Multipartyism is failed, has not failed. But as I told you, multi-party democracy or liberal democracy is, as to repeat Churchill's statement, is not necessarily the perfect. Yeah, that's a good word. It's not necessarily perfect. That is far from the truth. But it is the only alternative. Because if you think that one is not an alternative, you try authoritarianism. We tried Idi Amin. How far did we go? We tried Obote 1 and Obote 2. How far did we go?
Yeah, but again, when you look at all parties, they are in disarray. Does that speak to the illusion of multi-party democracy?
I don't think they are really in disarray as the manner. You're sounding alarmist.
Inevitably. I'm a realist.
It's the birth pranks of a democracy.
20 years down the road and we're talking about
20 years in the existence of the human race, my friend, is a very short time. 2 decades. But that's not to say...
They would be at the youthful stage.
I've given you examples of, for instance, Ghana. The elite, the intelligentsia there were deliberate. They were intentional in deepening democracy. At one point, they had a stalemate in an election. 49.2, was it the one of John Mahama and who? They had the stalemate. The opposition and the incumbent government had disagreed on who had won, and they were all claiming victory. Now, the intelligentsia, including their military, told them, between the two of you, you know who won. They locked them up in a room, and they told them, come up with an agreement. And between themselves, they knew what they had done to another, including, manipulation of this and that.
So who would initiate that here? With the resigned intelligentsia, the fearful religious leaders?
I think no, let me put it this way. Circumstances, blends and dynamics of circumstances always produce their own leaders. At every point and turn, even down the road, you're driving down the road, there's a gridlock at a junction. There will be that one individual who will get out of the car and what? Direct what? Traffic. Every circumstances give rise to their leaders. That's how the Benaisas of this world emerged. When they tell you how Paulo Mwanga emerged as a leader, chairman of the... Mind you, Mwanga had no military background, but he appeared at Moshi conference in the military fatigues. And they said, this is going to be the chairman of the what? Of the military commission. Remember
the same way Bobby emerged.
Exactly the same way Bobby emerged. So there will always be that person who will emerge. Nigeria is a very good example. Nigeria was a basket case. Nigeria was a failed state. It took that one individual whom nobody had ever profiled, General Sani Abacha. He organized an election, and to the surprise of everybody, he packed his bags and went into retirement. Have you ever heard of Sani Abacha at public occasions? No. He occasionally emerges going to supervise, to chair Commonwealth or African Union observer groups of elections. So there will always be that one person, or there will always be that thinking that emerges. Now, that can only happen if we are intentional, if we are deliberate. The other thing I was drawing from Ghana...
Should the country be obsessed with what is happening now?
There's cultism, and that is my worry. But what I want to point out to our listeners, to our viewers, is that politicians should at all material times sue for dialogue. Dialogue.
But let me give...
Let me conclude it. Through dialogue, can you build what? Tolerance. Through dialogue, can you build a consensus? Now, politicians the world over are always engaged in horse trading. Mpankolechi, Ngwe. Now, unless politicians are ready, unless politicians are pushed into the space where there's got to be give and take, we are going to continue on the trajectory of intolerance, polarization, and extremists taking charge of the agenda.
Who or what would reign into the current mess?
That's a good question. Yes, we are just trying to implore or proselytize that the political class should change, but it has failed to change. I think it is time also citizens stood their ground, especially the political elites, because you don't expect a peasant from Kabongo or from Chisoro to maybe lead the way, but they can participate. I think the population should reject or should participate. You know, what has been happening is that the citizens have been participated instead of participating. We are participated and we just come up in order to cheer people. They come with Prados and all these big cars that they have bought using taxpayers' money, and when they splash the dust in their eyes, people cheer up. It is time that we said, for example, now what is happening in NUP, it has taken almost 3 months or 2 months. Where are the supporters? The supporters should come in and one day come in and say, excuse me, we know you are our leaders and we are not removing you from leadership, but listen to us. If you don't listen to us, we shall throw you out. Similarly, even in the NRM, people should say, hey, excuse me. Yes, we know we have the leaders there.
I think you're talking ideals.
But ideals are the ones which move society. There is no society that has moved without anchoring in an ideal. None. But to be ideal doesn't mean that you remain idealistic. You shouldn't be realistic.
Okay, under the circumstances, who would stand up, for instance, to Bobby Wine?
No, I'm not in NUP, so don't come to make me now stand up to... They are supporters of NUP. They are there.
But Kagwanja, Mr. Kagwanja, there's been an attempt, there's been an attempt at mediation from Mengo. The Katikiro spoke. The Kabaka was nuanced. It was not very... yeah, but it was, you could see where it was going. And I have it on good authority that there are certain, the Elder Baganda who have been reaching out to Bobby Wine.
And possibly the
go
church.
slow.
We don't know.
To go slow. The church, I wouldn't be very certain, but I know, elite Baganda.
Okay, do you see a bit of an obstinate character?
The Right Honorable Mpuga represents the elite, the refined.
What do you mean refined?
I'll make my point. I'll make their point. By the way, make no mistake. The ghetto is coming to the fore in 2026. The ghetto is coming to our boardrooms. We have neglected that part of our society. They are going to claim their seat in national politics. Bobby Wine represents the aspirations of those persons.
Do you think he's still a force?
Bobby Wine?
Yes. Now that Mpuga is off the radar, can he go it alone?
Nobody's tall enough to see the exact future. We can only engage in scenario setting. And, money is a terrible evil. The major fallout in LRA, the defeat of LRA was not achieved through the bullet. It was money. The moment money was poured into the LRA, there was infiltration and money was poured. That's how there was a fallout between Konyi and Viso Toti. And when Konyi found out that Viso Toti had accessed more money than him, and Viso Toti had developed his own power base, he executed him. The execution of
what I wanted to point out to the general public out there is that nobody should celebrate the fallout in NUP. Nobody should celebrate the weaknesses which lead to factionalism in society. Nobody should celebrate, because that factionalism will spill over into other political parties and organizations.
Yeah, but for now, who is standing tall? Is it Bobby or Mpuga?
Who is doing what?
Who is standing tall?
I think people power is still tall, but it can easily be...
No, of the two protagonists.
I don't talk about individuals per se, because I don't believe in individualism. I believe there are two factions now, or two faces of NUP. There is a DP bloc of those who came from DP, and there is the original people power. I think that is the division that we see coming up. And I think people power is still taller, but that doesn't mean it is as tall as it used to be, because it is being weakened also.
So NUP has been upstaged, and there is now DP bloc and people power.
No, NUP has not. People power has not been upstaged.
No, NUP.
Yes.
NUP has been overtaken by people power. People power is resurrected.
No, people power transformed into NUP. And somehow, somewhere, I saw news in the media, I don't know how far true it is, that even Dr. Bwanika, who has been in Masaka pretending to be the spokesperson of NUP in Masaka, he went to a funeral and people jeered him. So that means there are still some roots of people power, even within Masaka and other areas. That is not to say that the DP bloc is also not powerful, but you are diverting me from what I wanted to say.
Okay.
What I wanted to say is that we should not celebrate the factionalization of any group in Uganda. We want groups, organizations, as building blocks for building a nation state. We don't have a nation state. And I have said it here, and I will continue to say it, because I want it to go in the minds of the people. There is no such a thing like Uganda has existed, and it will continue to exist. Nothing. Uganda as a country, as a nation state, or as a state, where is Yugoslavia? It now has 6 states. Where is the former Soviet Union? Where is where is Sudan?
Sudan, Khartoum itself is...
Khartoum itself is disintegrating.
Somalia.
Where is Somalia? Where is the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo? So let's not take it for granted that Uganda will always exist.
Even Nigeria, immediate post-independence.
And therefore, we should not celebrate any disintegration of any organization, because it doesn't portend well for nation building. We should be building organizations. We should be building society, so that finally we forge a nation state. Incidentally, people have been, let me correct this one historically. I think people have been having a narrative which is wrong. They say that independence politics the decolonization politics, the first political parties were actually dividing this country. Yes, there were divisions along certain primordial identities, but they were more forging a nation than currently. Why am I saying that? If you supported the Catholic Party, there were no Catholics, there were Catholics everywhere in Uganda. If you are supporting Protestants, there are Protestants everywhere in Uganda. But now if you begin supporting an individual because he comes from that tribe, that tribe is not everywhere in Uganda. So let's not always refer to the past almost negatively without looking at the positives in it and the negatives in the present.
I'm afraid we need to sign out.
Yes.
And I must really thank
but
you
I
very
think people
much.
must take that one into account.
Just a quick one. Whom does the fallout in NUP benefit?
Who is optimizing it?
Who benefits from it? There is a gentleman who was in Bunyoro. He spoke in Bunyoro. He said, "Nyowe NUP, ningia gimarao." He said he was going to collapse NUP at a rally in Bunyoro, and that was none other than President Museveni. And it's happening in less than 4 years.
Yeah, but the NUP, the idea will not disappear, even if NUP, the way we look at it, is there. What is NUP? What does it stand for?
Will it take the DP route?
What does it stand for, NUP? You know, you cannot remove the NUP issue. What is the NUP issue? What is that wave?
I thank you very much for your beautiful insights on the current state of politics in the country. Let's continue the discussion online. With this internal strife now getting deeper by the day, where is the future of multipartyism? Good morning.